Okay, good morning. This is the last week of this rotation. So this is question and answer. So I have no topics prepared. So you get to ask me questions. Questions. All right? Anything you want to ask. As well, related to aviation. Not anything you want to ask, but aviation related. Well, you can ask it, I just may not answer it. And maybe I will, depends on the question. Okay, usually I rely on Tim to bring me all the questions. But last time I remember you guys all had pretty good questions. So hopefully it'll go that way today. And I'm going to do something a little differently. I'm going to write them all up as you ask them. I'm going to try and get them all written up someplace on the board. So if I start answering and forget to write it up there, somebody stop me and say, write it on the board. Okay, whatever the question is. Okay. Go. Who's first? Hayden.
I need help explaining stalls, steep turns, and slow flights. I'm just having trouble explaining it in my own words.
Okay, so how to explain. So this is for testing purposes, right? Stall, steep turns and what? Slow flight. So basically level 2. Our flight level 2. Okay, so explaining those things is good for a couple reasons. One, when you can explain it, you can talk to yourself, you can tell yourself what it is, and you're going to understand a little bit better. When you can teach it to somebody else or explain it to somebody else, you're going to understand it better. And then if you get asked by me on a stage check or by an examiner on a check ride, you know what you're talking about, right? So that's all good. All right, so stalls, steep turns, and slow flight. What is a stall? Tell me what you think a stall is right now.
We practice them in the air for whatever.
You know what? Hang on, Nate. I'm going to back up. I'm going to start somewhere else on this. Let's start with slow flight. Because slow flight, in the way we practice in level 2, you're going to go from this to that. So let's start with that. Yeah. No, that was my fault because I'm asking.
Slow flight. It's just whenever we're in the air, we're flying straight, but we're just much slower, and we can the stick, we can just turn it however we want, however we want, you know?
Okay.
And we won't really make any, forgot what it's called. But nothing serious will happen.
Okay.
Just keep flying straight.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about really what slow flight. First of all, when you were saying the stick, you can move around. What you're saying is the controls are really light. You can. It's kind of mushy. It's mushy, right? Yeah. So when you're flying straight and level at a faster, excuse me, when you're flying at a faster airspeed, kind of like this, let's say at a cruise speed, you have a lot of airflow over the 3 flight control surfaces: ailerons, rudder, and elevator, right? You got a lot of airflow over it. So very little minor movement of the controls will cause a pitch, roll, or yaw change. It doesn't take much at all, right? But the slower you're moving, okay, so now we're flying very slowly, okay, the slower we're moving, if you just move the control surface a little bit, it doesn't do anything. So you have to move it a lot in order to get a roll or a pitch or a yaw. Actually, you don't want to pitch too much if you're in slow flight, because you'll get to the stall. But because of such a lesser amount of airflow over the control surfaces, you get a mushy feel. It takes more movement of the control surface. That's the mushy feel. All right. What is slow flight, though? Slow flight is flying in what we call the region of reverse command. Have you heard that before? Or flying behind the power curve. Have you heard that? Okay, so slow flight is being behind the power curve, or another way that we talk about it is being in the region of reverse command. Okay. And also, it is dangerous. Okay, I'm going to say it's dangerous at low altitudes. So when we practice slow flight, where are we typically at? Hi, good morning.
2,500 higher.
We're up there. We're a little higher, right? Because when you're in slow flight, you're very close to that. And if that happens when you're low to the ground, that's not a good place to be, right? Okay. So being in slow flight or being behind the power curve in the region of reverse command is a dangerous situation. Okay. All right. Why do we practice slow flight? There's as it relates to doing level 2, where we do slow flight and stalls and steep turns don't apply to this too much, but as it relates to slow flight and stalls, the reason that we practice slow flight is because in a 1G, one force of gravity condition, in other words, we're not yanking and banking, causing a lot of G force, right, which you kind of feel some in steep turns. So if wings are level and you just pull the power and kind of pitch back, we start getting slower and slower and slower. The controls start to get mushy, right? That's an indication that we are approaching the stall. So we practice it so that we're familiar with, in a 1G condition, like on an approach, let's say to landing, we've recognized what it feels like. Okay, here's how the controls start to feel prior to a stall. In a 1G condition, okay? Not if you're loading up the wing. So that's one reason that we do it. And then the other thing, when we're in behind the power curve and in the region of reverse command, what that looks like is this. If this is a graph of speed down here and power up the y-axis, okay. It's hard to answer these without getting deeper into a lot of other stuff. The power curve comes from the drag curves. Okay, so remember there's two types of drag. What are the two types of drag that we experience in flying airplanes? Induced drag, which does what? And parasitic drag. What's the difference between those two?
Induced we create with more power.
With not more power.
Speed.
No, not with speed. What's parasite? What's parasitic?
Parasitic is just like, friction from the skin and friction from the aircraft and just the overall design.
Okay, and when is parasitic drag at its greatest?
When you're going fast.
That's the speed one. Okay, so parasite drag, if this is our speed of 0, and let's say this is a speed of 120, we'll just use those two numbers along that continuum. When we're not moving, what's parasite drag? 0, right? Let me call this drag for a second. Okay. All right, as we speed up, drag gets higher. The faster we go, the more parasite drag we have, right? This is the one we're familiar with. Just driving a car, you get in your car, you put your hand out the window at a stoplight, you feel nothing. You start moving, the faster you go, the more of it you feel. That's this, parasite drag. Induced drag is drag that's created as a result of generating one of the 4 forces. Which one of them? What are the 4 forces?
Thrust, weight, lift, and drag.
Which one of those 4 forces generates induced drag?
Oh, lift.
Lift. When we generate lift. Cars don't generate induced drag, but they have thrust, right? And they have weight, and they have parasite drag. You have to have lift to generate induced drag. We don't generate lift traveling at 0, right? We have to be moving at some speed before we start generating lift. At that speed, that's where we start generating induced drag. And the difference is it's very high at slow speeds, and then the faster we go, the lower it gets. So it looks like that. Okay, everybody with me? All right, when we look at the 4 forces, we have thrust, drag, lift, and gravity or weight, right? We talk about the forces being in equilibrium. What does that mean? What does it mean that the forces are in equilibrium?
It's like thrust is like equivalent to drag and lift is equivalent to weight.
That
Straight and level flying.
not in straight and level flight.
Cruise.
Not necessarily, well, in cruise probably, but there's something else I'm looking for. It probably is in straight and level flight. It probably is when you're in cruise. Or it actually is when you're in cruise. But what's the terminology I'm really looking for here? Could it be in equilibrium when we're in a climb? When we're climbing? Yes. Could it be in equilibrium when we're descending? Could it be in equilibrium when we're doing turns? Yes. So what am I looking for? The four forces are in equilibrium when we are in steady state. What's the next? Unaccelerated flight. Those are the two things. Steady state, unaccelerated flight. So steady state means that the forces are not changing. The state of the forces are not moving. And we're not accelerating either this direction or in a climb direction. There's no accelerating going on. Okay, when that happens, all of the forces are in equal, not all of them. This one equals that and this one equals that. They don't all four equal. Okay, the opposing forces are equal. All right, if that's the case, then let's come back over here and let's look at this drag curve here, or these two drag lines, and let's put a total drag. Okay, so this one we said is parasite. This one is induced. Okay, then I could draw a curve that represents both of those curves that might look, I don't know, like that or something like that, right? That would be total drag. So I'm combining both drags together into one curve. Total drag. All right. So if this and this are in equilibrium in steady state flight, then that means that this curve I just drew is both the total drag curve and the thrust curve, because they have to be equal. So they're the same line. Make sense? Okay. Now we can talk about slow flight. All right. So I got a marker that works. That's okay. All right, so right here at the bottom of this curve right here, where these two lines come together, the low part of the curve, right there, whatever that speed is, whatever that speed relates to, that's a very efficient speed. Very efficient, because if I fly any, focus on the total drag or thrust line, and this can be total drag or thrust. Drag, thrust, it's the same curve. Okay? If I'm flying at that speed and I come over here and I take a measurement of the drag, whatever it is, okay? If I fly any slower, that drag increases. See that? Starting to go back up. If I fly any faster, that drag increases, right? Because I'm at the bottom of that curve. So now look at it from a thrust standpoint, the power lever. If I want to fly any slower, I have to increase power. If I want to fly any faster, I have to increase power. So that's kind of weird, isn't it? Right? So that point right there is a point where we're at the bottom of the thrust/drag curve. All right, so speeds behind this. All of these speeds back here are behind the power curve, or in the region of reverse command. This is where we are when we're in slow flight. We're flying at a speed back in this range, because it is requiring more power to fly slower. That's the concept of being in the region of reverse command or being behind the power curve. So the region of, hopefully you can visualize what we mean by being being behind the power curve. Here's the power curve, and we're behind the bottom of it. So that's why we get that word, that term. Is this helping you at all, Eden? Okay. All right, so this is being behind the power curve. Everything on this side, which is normally where we're at when we're flying. Very seldom do we fly on this side of the power curve. We're usually on that side. From a speed standpoint, we're on that side of the power curve. Okay, but the plane will fly slower than that, because this point right here is what? What speed is that right there? That's stall speed. That's where the wing won't produce lift anymore. That's the stall speed, right? So we can fly between stall speed and, it's up faster than that. Okay, That's being in that's slow flight. We use our understanding of being in the region of reverse command or flying being behind the power curve when we do, not only when we practice slow flight and stalls, when you get to where you're, how many of you have started or done short field landings? You're in the region of reverse command in a short field landing. How low to the ground are you?
Pretty low.
It's very dangerous. That's why I put this here. Short field landings can be extremely dangerous. They can be extremely dangerous, okay? You could also be in the region of reverse command on short field or VX climbs, right? You're trying to clear an obstacle. We're flying very slowly with full power. We're back here in the region of reverse command with a lot of power. That's dangerous because if the engine hiccups, I mean, we're not very high off the ground. Bad things can happen really, really quick, right? Okay. That's why I say it's dangerous. Be aware of it being dangerous. Okay. All right, so slow flight. This is slow flight. Stalls. Aiden, this was your question. What's a stall? It's this point here, so obviously the slower we get, at some point we're going to stall. But what is a stall? How do we define a stall? Say it again. I didn't hear. You forgot. Okay. All right. What's a stall? Somebody else. I didn't hear you.
When the engine shuts down?
When the engine shuts down? No, I'm looking for an aerodynamic stall. So I'm looking for this right aerodynamically. When does a stall occur? When there's no more lift on the wing. That's one way to put it.
Exceeding critical angle of attack.
That's the answer. When you exceed critical angle of attack, the wing stalls, the airfoil stalls. Okay. Now, in this particular example, that will happen at whatever this airspeed is, in whatever this power drag curve was configured for full flaps, no flap, whatever it is. Whatever that speed is, that's where it will stall in what condition? Yeah, 1G is what I'm looking for. One force of gravity. Okay, that's annoying out there, whatever's going on out there. Yeah, it's pretty annoying. I don't know why he's operating right there. Okay, that's a stall. And then steep turns. The reason that we do steep turn, what are steep turns, Aiden?
Steep turns when you turn to the 45-degree,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a bank, but
Yeah, 45-degree
you
bank.
turn like all the way. And
Yep,
You go like a full 360.
Yep.
Or no.
yep, 360, all the way around.
That's really what I think of it.
Okay. Yeah, so a steep turn is a steep bank, really. So generally when we're flying, we don't want to exceed, we don't want to get real steep. There's no reason to get, pull, real steep turns, right? So we're typically 20, 30-degree banks, okay? But when we do steep turns, we have to get that wing at no less than 45 degrees and no more than 60. So we got to be between 45 and 60 degrees. We have to hold altitude and hold airspeed and do a 360-degree turn and roll out within 10 degrees of our roll in, and then turn around the other direction and do it the other way. All right. The reason that we're doing that is because we're showing a couple of things. Number one, it's teaching you to maneuver the airplane at closer to the edge of its limits. Okay. When you start flying, if this is our performance box for the airplane, you get outside that box, the wing stalls or bad things happen, right? So things that happen that you don't really want to have to happen during normal flight. When you start flying, we keep you right at about inside here. But the more you train, the closer we get to the edges. And the closer you need to be able to take that plane to everything that it's able to do. Okay, steep turns get you out a little closer to the edge. So when you start doing steep turns, you're getting closer to the edge of what that plane can do. Okay, a couple of things happen in steep turns. Number one, we're increasing the load factor on the wing. Do you know why that's happening? Can you explain why that's happening, Aiden? What's that? It is a gravitational force. It's an added gravitational force. Do you know why? Can you explain why?
Ooh, explain the question.
Okay, so weight right here. Let's say that we weigh 1,000 pounds right here. let's say the whole airplane weighs 1,000 pounds. How much lift has to be generated? 1,000 pounds, because I got to be in equilibrium, right? So if I want this airplane that weighs 1,000 pounds to fly, then I have to generate a force of 1,000 pounds in lift. Now I can fly. Okay. When I do a turn, when I turn the airplane, the force, the lifting force, doesn't stay 1,000 pounds, it increases. I have to generate more lift in order to turn the airplane. Okay? And how do I do that when you turn? When you're practicing turns, what are you doing? Are you just doing this with a stick, or are you doing this and pulling back a little bit? You have to pull back a little bit because you're increasing the lift a little bit. You're increasing the angle of attack to increase the lift. We have to do that. When you do that, you start to feel more force in the seat. You feel heavier in the seat. So when you're doing a 20 or 30 degree turn, you don't notice anything, right? But when you do your steep turns, especially if you get to 60 degrees, the force of gravity doubles. How much do you weigh?
Like 120.
120. All right, so when you're in a steep turn, if you're at 60 degrees, then you feel like you weigh 240 pounds. That's what it feels like, and that's called the G load or the G forces. All right, so if you do a 2G turn, if we're in a 60 degree bank turn, a 2G turn, then the weight of the airplane is 1,000, but the lift has to be 2,000. Therefore, we have that push in the seat. That's the G force in the seat. Okay, so the reason we do steep turns is so that we start to feel in these steep bank turns, we get these G forces building up on us. Okay, and when we do, and that's increasing the wing loading. Wing loading is simply how much weight is the wing carrying. In this situation right here, straight and level, how much weight is the wing carrying? What's this force? 1,000 pounds. It's 1G. But when we maneuver the airplane, you could imagine if you're just flying straight and you yank back and did that, would that increase the load on the wing? Absolutely. There would be a force put on the wing. Same thing happens when you bank. There's a force put on the wing. Okay? When you increase the wing loading, something else increases. What else increases? Stall speed increases. That's another reason that we do these, because we want to show you that in straight and level flight, if this is my stall speed, whatever this is right here, as I increase the loading on the wing, my stall speed goes that way. I stall at a faster airspeed. Okay? I'm going to go, next week is aerodynamics. It's week 1. We're going to roll right back into week 1, and it's aerodynamics, and we're going to talk at length and ad nauseum over these topics right here. All right, so to kind of wrap up that question, how to explain stall, steep turns, and slow flight. So slow flight is what now? What would you say slow flight is?
Behind the power curve.
Yeah, flying behind the power curve or in the region of reverse command. That's slow flight. Slow flight. So another way of saying it is if I want to fly slower, I have to add power. So if you want to fly right now, in your training right now, if you're flying along, you're doing 110, 120, whatever, your instructor says, slow down. Maintain altitude, but slow down. What do you have to do? If you want to slow down. What do you do with power if you want to slow down?
Take some out.
Take some out. But when you get, so here, I want you to picture your throttle. Okay, I want to slow down. Slowing down, throttle's coming out, throttle's coming out, throttle's coming out, throttle's coming out. But once I get here, throttle has to go back in, throttle has to go back in. It's just reverse command. Okay, to fly slower, I'm adding power. That's the region of reverse command. It's backward on the command. Okay? Or being behind the power curve. That's slow flight. I want to fly slower, I have to add power. That's backwards from normal, right? If you're over here, if you want to fly, you want to fly slower, you pull power out. Once you get back here, now you start adding power back in. This is all assuming we're maintaining altitude. Right, okay. All right, and so that's slow flight. And then stalls, what is a stall? There's only one correct answer, and somebody said, I think you said it. There's only one correct answer. What is it? Critical angle of attack. As soon as you exceed the critical angle of attack, the airfoil, the wing, this shape, this airfoil, the airflow moving around that wing ceases to be able to get around that wing in such a manner that it generates enough lift. In order to, it's still going to create some lift, but it's not enough. It's not 1,000 pounds worth of lift. So the airplane begins to descend. That's the stall. Has nothing to do with engines. It's aerodynamic stall. All right, and then steep turns. How would you explain a steep turn?
Between 45 and 60 degrees.
Between 45 and 60 degrees, 360 degree turn between 45 and 60 degrees, maintaining altitude. So in order to do that, you're going to have to put in a fair amount of back pressure. Increase the loading on the wing. Look, you can turn a plane without increasing the loading on it. If I do this and I don't pull back, will I turn? Absolutely, I'll just descend while I turn. If I don't want to descend while I turn, I have to pull back. That's what increases the load factor. That's the force, that's centrifugal force that you feel on it. All right, good question, Aiden. Does that help? That help you? Kinda. Anything else that I can clear up?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. All right, that was good. All right, what's next? Questions? This is not, you're new, so this, what is your name, by the way? I'm sorry.
Aline.
Aline. I'm David, and this is the rest of the class. Were you here last week?
No.
Okay. So this is question and answer, so I don't have any topic. You guys just ask whatever questions you want.
So I haven't done ground school yet.
Okay.
Or nothing. I'm just kind of seeing what flight schools I like.
Mm-hmm.
What's included and excluded in y'all's quote price?
In our what price?
In your quote price?
What's it?
Online it says like average $15,000.
Oh, okay. So what we're talking about there is the FAA has a minimum of 40 hours of flight training to get your license, and within that 40 hours, there's a certain amount of dual, solo, cross-country, night, all that kind of stuff. So if you can get it done all in that 40 hours, which most people don't, it would be less than 15,000, quite a bit less than 15,000. Most people will do it in around 60. Okay, so the 15 is based on you doing it somewhere around 60 hours, getting done in about 60 hours. That's where the 15 comes from. So it could be less, it could be more. Depends on how many hours you actually have in your logbook when you get done.
That includes like writtens and examiner fees?
Yeah, that's got the written and the examiner fees in it. Yeah, but again, it's kind of a guess. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's private pilot, right?
That's private pilot.
Light sport.
Not sport. No, that's private pilot. Sport's a little bit less, but not much really. And it's the same thing holds. It just depends on you. I can tell you that in 45 years I've been flying for 45 years. I've been instructing for 30 years. I have trained pilots that got their license in under 45 hours about a half a dozen times. That's it. It's very difficult to do in 40 hours. Very, very difficult.
Are those the kind of guys that got like their written's done beforehand?
Sometimes, but I'm going to tell you that getting your written done, if you want to do a fast-paced thing, then you need to have your written done ahead of time. Like if you want to get it done in a couple of months, get your written done ahead of time.
Cool.
But having your written done really doesn't go as far as you might think towards getting your license. Getting your written done just means that you've proved that you can answer 60 questions A, B, or C with a 70 or better. That's all that means. It doesn't mean that you understand anything.
Right.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right.
Changes quite a bit once you get in the airplane.
Yes, the practical and the practical side is when you do your practical test for your check ride, the practical. Okay. You're going to do half of it is an oral and half of it is a flight test. So the first half is the oral. You're going to sit down across the desk from an examiner, and you're going to get peppered with questions and scenarios. And what you're not going to get is, okay, here's a question and here's A, B, or C. Which is the answer? That's not what you're going to get. You're going to have to explain, what's going on and how you would answer this question, or how you would evaluate, or how you would resolve a particular scenario that they give you. That kind of stuff. That's where the practical side comes. That's where this class does. Yeah. Okay. Next. Questions?
So on the test, you said it's what, 60 questions?
The written is for private, it's 60 questions. For sport, it's 40.
Okay, so is that like, I was just looking at, I was retired Navy,
Mhm.
so whenever we went up for advancement, they sent us to a test-taking class,
Uh-huh.
and you go through and count your A's and count your B's and count your C's, so if it came out to 100, you had like 25 of each. So
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
I was just wondering if the FAA test was similar to that.
Well, so the FAA question, so there are areas of knowledge that you have to show proficiency in. Aerodynamics, weather, different areas of knowledge, systems, all that kind of stuff. You will get navigation. You'll get 60 questions, okay? And you will get some number of questions and you're sampling all of those areas of knowledge that you have to have some proficiency in. The number of questions that you get in each area, it depends on how the test, there's about 800 or 900 questions in the database. You're going to get 60 of them. You don't know which 60 you're going to get. You don't know how many of each type you're going to get. Yeah.
Okay, I was just looking at it from what I did before, where
Yeah.
they tell you, you take your test, then you go back and count your answers. And if you got more A's than you do B's, C's, or D's, then you go back and you correct your.
Oh no, you don't get to go back and correct. You're going to get. It's a computer generated. When you hit done, there's your score, pass or fail. It's right there, and they give it to you immediately. And and you can't go back and look at what you missed. They don't let you look at you will immediately know what areas of operations you missed. So you may know it had to do with navigation. But if you don't remember a question in navigation that maybe you were iffy on, you're not going to know what you missed. Yeah. Okay. Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is kind of an observation I had last weekend when doing pattern work. And it's about maintaining coordinated flight.
Okay.
So I noticed, especially on a really windy day,
Yeah.
that there was probably 20 knots blowing down the runway.
Okay.
Taking off at 1.7.
Was it right down the runway?
About 5 degrees off.
Okay.
5-10 degrees. So it really wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
But in the left pattern, I was noticing that climbing out on BY, okay, making that initial turn from upwind to crosswind.
From departure to crosswind.
Right. That it was generally I'm very good at maintaining coordination on the aircraft.
What plane were you flying?
167. Or let's see,
We'll have
hang on,
167.
oh gosh. I actually put it in my calendar. Let's see, it was. Yeah, that's ground school. No, it was 124 Golf X-ray.
124 Golf X-ray. Oh, okay, okay. And tell me what was happening. Were you
So I was
skidding or
good.
slipping?
So I was actually slipping
You were slipping,
a
yeah.
bit coming, on making that left downward in that high.
That's odd.
Yeah.
That's an odd place to be slipping.
Yeah, but I just noticed that I would glance down at the slip skid indicator, and it was just kind of moving all over the place. And and sometimes it would look like it was coordinated, but it wouldn't feel it in my butt.
Okay.
And anyway, but it was the only place I was noticing that. The rest of the pattern totally fine.
Okay.
I wanted to know if you had any insights.
Yeah, I have a lot of
why
insight.
that could be.
Absolutely, I have a lot of insight. That's that's typically where you're going to skid through a turn. That departure to crosswind turn is where you're going to skid. Okay. So the question, I got to write the questions up here. Sebastian's going to get mad at me. You want me to write the questions up? Okay, so how do I phrase this question? Coordination. From departure to crosswind turn, right? Okay. All right, so first off, let's talk about what is coordination for the people in the room that may not. I'm assuming that you haven't started training, or maybe you have.
What was the question?
Flight training, have you started your training, your flight training?
I only have 4 hours.
You have 4. So you've started. You've started. You have not started. Okay.
About this 40 scores like yesterday.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's talk about coordination and what coordination is. Coordination is keeping essentially it's keeping the tail following the nose through a turn. Okay. So there's a couple of ways that I'll explain it. Have you seen those big long fire engines where you got a guy in the ass end of the truck driving the back of the truck? That's what the rudder's doing. It's driving the back end of the airplane through a turn. Okay. So if you're coordinated, what's happening is the tail and the nose are flying through the same line in a turn. So I'm gonna put this plane in a turn right here, and if you look at the line, if you picture the line that the nose, the spinner, the engine is going through, you'll notice that the tail is flying through that same path. Notice that? Okay, I could also make this turn like this. Now the nose and the tail are not flying to the same path. That would be a slipping turn. Or I can make this turn like that. That would be a skidding turn. Okay, so this would be too much rudder in the turn. This would be not enough rudder. Okay, and that would be just perfectly coordinated. Okay, all right, so that's a coordinated turn. All right, why do we need to do coordinate? Do we have to use the rudder in a turn? Don't have to, but it's uncoordinated when you don't do it. So where did rudders come from? Which is the most important flight control of the 3 flight controls on an airplane? Which is the most important? If you had to say, this one I can't do without, which one would it be? The rudder. It'd be the rudder. That's the most important flight control on an airplane because we need to maintain directional control. This is what keeps our nose pointed where we want it. If we can't point our nose where we want it, we can't control an airplane. When the Wright brothers first started flying, they didn't have rudders. They had an elevator in the front. They had a canard, right? They had an elevator in the front, and they twisted the wings. They warped the wings to get the airplane to bank. And in their testing, what they recognized is they had no rudder. They had a rudder, but it was a fixed rudder. It wasn't a movable rudder. It was just a vertical stabilizer. And what they recognized is, hey, we'd turn this way, and the airplane would violently go the other direction and crash. I'm like, what the heck is going on? What was going on is something called adverse yaw. That's why you have to have a rudder, to control adverse yaw. So what happens is this. When you go to turn an airplane, when you bank the airplane, the nose goes the opposite way. It yaws adversely in the direction of the turn. So in our modern aircrafts in the design, all right, you go to turn the airplane, the nose goes that way, and then it's going to eventually catch up. Typically what would happen, as long as you're not too slow.
Is that diagram like we see an arrow going spiraling around the plane, striking the rudder?
No, that's left turning tendencies.
Okay.
That's left turning tendencies. So what's happening with adverse yaw is that, remember the 4 forces, right? Okay, thrust, drag, lift, and weight. When you generate lift, what do you also generate? I just erased it.
Drag.
Drag, what kind of drag?
Induced.
Induced drag. So when we generate lift, we generate induced drag, and the more lift we generate, the more induced drag we generate, all right? So now picture the lift vectors on this wing. So my thumb is going to be the lift, all right? If I want to turn this way, I'm going to generate that much lift on this wing and maybe just that much lift on this wing. I'm generating more lift on this one. So as I lift, it pulls backwards. That's adverse yaw. It yaws the airplane in the adverse direction. If I'm lifting this wing, more lift here, left lift here, and it pulls it this way. That adverse yaw, this one right here, I'm generating more lift on this wing, so I generate more drag on that wing. All right, that's the purpose for the rudder. So as the nose is trying to go that way, I use the rudder to keep it in line before I turn. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, now let's talk about your question. Coordination from departure to crosswind turn. Left turning tendencies. You brought up left turning tendencies. What are they? Because this is what's happening here.
Right.
You have 2 things. You got left turning tendencies and, well, that's really what's happening. It's
Yeah,
left turning
it's the
tendencies.
counter rotation of,
Yeah.
of the propeller.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right. So we have propeller-driven airplanes. That's what we're flying. And the propeller is on the center line of the airplane, and it's turning from our perspective in a clockwise direction. If we were flying an airplane that had an eastern block engine and it turned the other way, we would have right turning tendencies. We have left turning tendencies. Okay. So the propeller's turning in that direction, and because of some forces, which unless you want me to get into them right now, I won't. Unless somebody asks that question later, I'll get into them. You have turning tendencies that cause the airplane to both roll and yaw to the left. Okay, rolling and yawing to the left. So and they are most pronounced at high power and high angle of attack. So where are we at high power and high angle of attack?
I've done the departure to.
Right there. We're high power, high angle of attack. So we have maximum left turning tendencies, left yawing and rolling tendencies going on right here. Okay. And by the way, of the 4, 3 of them are yaw and 1 of them is a roll, all right? So most of them are a yawing tendency. Okay. So as we're climbing out and we're making that left turn, what I see students do often is skid through the turn because they step on additional rudder when you don't need it. Usually in that left turn, because while you're climbing, you're usually holding right rudder. You're holding right rudder to keep the nose from yawing that way because of all the left turning tendencies. And then when you go to make this turn, typically all you have to do is release a little bit of that right rudder. But I'll see people stepping on the left rudder, which causes a skidding turn to the left. Now, what you're explaining is not what typically happens. So explain again what was happening with you. You said you were slipping through the turn.
There was actually a little bit of a transition between slip and skid. It's almost like I was fighting.
Was it gusty?
It was very gusty.
Okay, well, it could have just been as simple as some gusting happening.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But because generally speaking, I'm fairly proficient at maintaining coordinated flight. But that day, on specifically
Could
on
have
that
just
upwind to crosswind, man, because you're climbing
and you're slow, and the slower you're going, the more the gusts are going to affect what's happening to you. Especially if there's any crosswind gust, any portion that's hitting that tail causing that to happen.
It was really windy.
Yeah. That was probably just gusting. Okay, good. Morning. All right, good questions so far. Got 15 more minutes before the first break.
What is a realistic weekly schedule for a student who's
Once a week.
full time?
That's what?
Willing to do this like full time?
You want to do it full time? I do 3 times a week. I'd fly 3 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week.
And at that rate, how long would it take in terms of like months?
Like 3 months.
Awesome. Cool.
Take you about 3 months. Your problem will be, have you already taken, you haven't taken the written. Your problem will be knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, the faster you do it, the harder it is to get the knowledge. I can teach you to fly an airplane in a week, but I can't get the knowledge in I can't pound the knowledge in your head in a week.
That takes time.
That takes time. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like memorization or just like?
No, it is not memorization. So when you take your check ride, so there's 4 levels of learning. You know what the 4 levels of learning are? There is rote, understanding, application, and correlation. Okay, so rote is memorizing. That's the first level. So when we're learning something new, the first thing we do is memorize stuff. Then we move to a point where we kind of understand it. Then we're able to apply it. And then we're able to take other things that we have application level knowledge and pull them together to correlate new stuff. That's where you got to be when you take your check ride. When the examiner is sitting across that desk asking you questions, he or she is looking for answers at that level right there. That takes a little bit more time. You can't learn that in a week. You can't do that in a week. And especially when it comes to aviation, because when you learn anything new, what do? You don't learn it in a vacuum, right? You have to have, I don't care whether it's aviation or physics, whatever it is, you have to have a base foundational set of knowledge that you build on, right? In aviation, there are so many new things for most people that you don't even have a base to set it on. So you have to learn, you have to lay the foundation and then build on the foundation. So sometimes especially in some of the subject areas, it might take you a little bit longer to build that knowledge. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. Now, there are some things that are rote. There are some things that are memorization, like V speeds. What's the V speeds? What's VY and VX on this airplane, Tim? VY and VX, what are the speeds for VY and VX?
75 and 65.
Yeah, so that's just memorization. I just know what they are in that airplane. Stall speed, same thing. Some stuff is. Other stuff you have to have more knowledge to correlate. Okay. Next question. Okay.
How do you recognize the class of airspace while you are flying?
How do you recognize airspace while you're flying? Is that your question? Okay. Well, hopefully you have a chart in your lap or ForeFlight or something that's showing you where you are. If it's ForeFlight, it's showing you because it's GPS based. If it's a chart, then you should know where you are, right, on that chart. And the chart shows airspace. So based on what you see on the chart, you should know. There are no charts here. You should know where you are based on that. Yeah, thank you, Tim. So when I open this up here, like I could point to any place on this map and say, this is the altitude you're at. What airspace are you in? And you should know the answer. Does that
Yes.
answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody else? You may not know what that is right now, but you will. By the time you get to the point where you're going to take your check ride, actually by the time you get to your cross-country phase, you're going to know that, or even before that, you're going to know that. You have to know that.
Is that why I got to use like the iPad?
You don't have to use an iPad. You either need an iPad or you need, ForeFlight, or you got to have a chart in your lap. Because you need to know where you are. There's no street signs up there. Right? Thanks, Tim. Okay. The nice thing about ForeFlight is if you're unsure of towered airspace, B, C, or D airspace, if you're unsure, you can click on ForeFlight and it'll tell you what it is. It won't tell you the G airspace or the C airspace. Sometimes it'll tell you C to the surface, but some of those you have to just know, all right, well, I'm at this altitude here, I'm in this airspace. Okay. Okay. All right. Another one?
Could you explain like the to and from indication on the VOR?
To and from on the VOR. Okay. Okay, VOR is a navigation, a type of navigation, VOR navigation. So when we navigate, there's lots of different types. You could have celestial navigation. You can look at the stars and navigate by the stars. You could have radio navigation. VOR is a type of radio navigation, so you have to have equipment in your airplane and equipment on the ground, and you use that to navigate. Okay, could do GPS navigation, which is what everybody does now, right? That's satellite-based navigation. So there's lots of different pilotage, dead reckoning. That's what we teach you is pilotage and dead reckoning. So that's essentially a map, a chart, a compass, and a stopwatch. So a chart, a compass, and a stopwatch, you can go anywhere on the globe if you know how to do it, right? That's what you have to learn as a private pilot, which we teach you. But VOR is another type of navigation that you have to have some proficiency in as a private pilot. Sport pilots don't have to understand this. All right. So to and from. So in the airplane, in the airplane, and the way this is shown can be different based on the plane you're in, okay? So I'm going to be very generic with this. But in the airplane, you're going to have a piece of equipment that will show you that you're either to or from, and it could show it to you in lots of different ways, okay? It'll show you you're either to or from a particular VOR station, okay? On the ground, out in the wild, out in the fields, there are these things called VOR stations, and they're actual, and you may have seen them before. If you're ever driving by a field and you see this thing that kind of looks like this, looks like that. It's like a cone sitting on this round thing. That's a VOR. That's the station that's sending out these signals. Okay, and on the sectional chart, it's simply you have a symbol, and it will have, I'm just going to draw 4 of them, but it will have 360 radials. So this will be 360, this would be 90, this would be 180, so this is just a compass rose, okay, 270, and then you'd have, 1, 2, 3, 10, all the way around, 360 of these radials that emanate from the VOR station on the ground. It's actually only one, the equipment in your airplane divided up into 360, but for purposes of understanding it, think about it this way. Think about that this station, that funky looking thing that I just drew, sitting out there in the field someplace, is sending out 360 signals, okay? You have the ability in your airplane, if you have the right equipment, navigational equipment, to tune into this station and say, hey, let me look at one of those 360 radials, okay? So in the airplane, you also have what's called an OBS, Omni Bearing Selector, okay? And in that Omni Bearing Selector, you would say something like, let me look at radial or bearing 360. So you'd put 360 in your OBS. Now, from within the airplane, your equipment is looking at that radial, actually that radial there, plus its extension going this way, right? So that line, it's looking at that line. This is the only 360 radial, right? This one's 180, but they lie collinear, right? They're collinear with each other. That's the radial, and that's the, collinear side of it, if you will, all right? So, to and from. You want to know what to and from means? Okay, let's say that you are over here. You're right there. X marks the spot relative to that station. And you set up your radios like that, okay? It's going to show you that you are to the station because you've not yet reached that radial. You have to go to the station to get to that radial, okay? If you fly that way, as soon as you get here, that's going to switch to from, because now you're on the other side. Now you're from the station on the side of that radial. Okay? Now I'm not putting the needle in there anywhere because you didn't ask me about the needle, you just asked me about the to and from. You understand the needle and how that works?
Yes.
Left and right, okay. Okay? Yep. All right. Any more? Probably got time for one more before the break. I thought you guys were coming prepared today. All right, Tim, it's up to you now. Throw me a question. You gonna wait a little while?
I got one for the flight computer, but we'll save that for after the break.
Flight computer, okay, all right. All right, I'll get it up on the screen then during the break. You talking about the E6B? Yeah, okay.
A lot of these, they're answering kind of stuff I want to hear. They're answering.
Okay, well, good.
It's all good.
All right, good. Good. All right, well, then let's just take an early break. It's about 4 minutes before I would normally do it. We'll just take it early. Okay, so we have a question about the dreaded E6B. E6B question. What is the question?
It's
Hopefully it's not how to use it. Hopefully it's
No,
specific.
no, it's really more around the going back and forth between the density altitude and like the pressure altitude, the conversion.
The conversion from, okay, so to get density altitude, you need pressure altitude.
Right.
So it's not really a conversion thing, it's, so I'm not sure I'm,
I'm probably not asking it real well. But really, it was those three boxes in the middle when we were.
right in here?
Yeah,
These
when
three
we were-
right here?
Yeah, when we were making
Okay.
some of the conversions and stuff like that in some
Okay.
of the directions, it was.
All right, so remember,
having a hard time with it.
so everything on this side as it relates to these boxes, okay, deals with airspeed corrections.
Okay.
Everything on this side as it relates to this information deals with altitude corrections. Does that help?
That actually does.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the information that you're putting in here, or the two sets of numbers that you're aligning here and here are the same sets of numbers. It is pressure altitude in thousands of feet, opposite temperature in Celsius. So here you got temperature in Celsius up here. Here you got temperature in Celsius in the box. Down here you got pressure altitude, right? So you're aligning the same sets of numbers, but when you do it on this side, you're looking for density, altitude, and airspeed corrections. When you do it on this side, you're looking for altitude corrections. And when you put numbers opposite each other here, they don't line up over here. So if I wanted to put 5,000 feet, I'll show you. If I want to put 5,000 feet opposite 0 degrees Celsius as an example, somewhere in there. So here you got 5,000 feet
Right.
opposite 0 degrees Celsius. You'll notice that over here, that doesn't line up. Here's 0 degrees Celsius, but it comes in opposite, 12, 14, 16,000 feet. You see? So you set the numbers up based on whether you're trying to do an airspeed correction or an altitude correction. Okay? All right. While I got this up, any questions? Questions on this? Well, this guy's up there. And by the way, you don't have to use this. I teach this. You can get an electronic E6B. You can buy one. They're like $100 and some. Or you can buy this. It's like 15. This doesn't take batteries.
I honestly just forgot like how to use it in general. It's
Yeah.
very difficult.
It's not difficult. Come on, it's not difficult. I tell people here's the reality of getting in this day and age. It wasn't like this when I learned to fly. The reality was you had to know how to use this. You had to. You couldn't calculate stuff. You just couldn't do it, right? The reality now is you have to learn how to use this for testing purposes. And then once you get in the airplane, the technology is such that everything is just right there in the cockpit for you. And that's a double-edged sword, right? Because it's all right there. And on the flip side of that is you don't know how the sausage is being made behind the scenes. And so if the sausage maker goes down, you don't know what the hell to do. Right? So there's good and bad to it. But anyway, you could buy one of these or you can get an electronic one. And what I tell people is, look, if you get an electronic one, it's like a calculator, but it's not you still have to learn how to use it. So you either spend $100+ and learn how to use it, or you spend $15 and learn how to use it. So which one do you want to learn how to use? You got to learn how to use both of them. So it's up to you. FAA doesn't care, but you got to know how to use one of them. All right. Other questions? If there's none on this, what else do we have? You guys, are you shy today or you just didn't come with questions? All right. Let's see. I'm gonna preload next week then. I'll just start talking about some aerodynamic stuff. How about that? How's that sound? All right. And maybe this will spur some questions. Okay, so let's go back to this diagram right here that I drew before. Okay, so there's your four forces. They're in equilibrium when? When are the four forces in equilibrium?
Steady state, unaccelerated flight.
Steady state, unaccelerated flight. That's when they're in equilibrium. So if we're in steady state, unaccelerated flight, thrust equals drag, lift equals weight. If you shove the throttle in, you increase power, okay, you might think you're going to start going faster. Well, you will, but only if you push the nose down a little bit, otherwise you'll just go up. But if you maintain altitude and you push the throttle in, then the thrust vector gets longer, and as it gets longer, the drag vector increases until they steady out, and now you're not accelerating anymore and you're back in equilibrium. If you pull the throttle out, the drag vector gets smaller. You pull the throttle out, the thrust vector gets shorter and the drag vector gets shorter until they equalize. Now you're back in steady state flight. Right? So if you move a throttle lever or you move one of the three flight controls and then you stop, you hold what you got. After a few seconds, the forces will go back into equilibrium and you're back in steady state unaccelerated flight. Steady state unaccelerated flight does not mean you're in straight and level flight. You can be climbing, descending, turning, whatever. It's just that you're not moving anything. You're holding things steady, and then after a while, things stabilize. When you're in a spin, everybody knows what a spin is, or you've heard that term? Okay. After about 3 rotations, you're in steady state unaccelerated flight. You're spinning towards the earth. And all the forces are in equilibrium, right? I mean, anybody can go out and do spins. We don't have to train. We don't have to do them in flight training. And the only way you have to do them in flight training is to become a flight instructor. You have to go do them. But what you'll recognize is after about 3 spins, when it first starts, things are just rocking and rolling. After about 3 spins, you're just like, oh, okay. And then the earth is spinning around and you're just kind of, everything's steady. You're just spinning. The forces have equalized. Okay. You have a horizontal stabilizer back here with an elevator attached to it, right, for pitch stability. If we weigh 1,000 pounds, how much lift are we generating?
1,000 pounds.
Okay. We're generating 1,000 pounds. Okay. So here's something a little bit odd. Let me talk about the center of gravity real quick here. Got a center of gravity right here, so that's where all of the weight is said to concentrate. So that's where weight acts. Weight is always going to act right through the center of gravity. So the center of gravity will move on the airplane longitudinally this way. We'll move back and forth based on how you load the plane, right? So if you put a lot of weight back here, it's going to shift the central point of the weight back. If you have weight loaded more up here, this little point moves, it'll move back and forth, right? Okay. So where this weight is located relative to where lift is generated on the wing has a lot to do with the stability of the aircraft. How many of you have ever played with little balsa wood gliders or just, little airplanes, little hand-thrown little gliders? You guys play with those? Okay. So you ever take a paper clip and move it around on it so that, you can move the weight. You can move the center of gravity by moving that paper clip around. Well, if the paper clip's too far at the back, you throw it and it just goes whoosh, and just tumbles out of the sky. Very unstable. If you move it too far forward, it's really straight and just straight into the ground because the weight, but it's really stable. It's like a lead sled right into the ground, right? But you can move it to the right spot where that center of gravity is just in the right place, and that thing just flies and flies and flies and flies and flies really well, right? So it's a very stable airplane, or it's a appropriately stable airplane. Okay. When we load an airplane, and when an airplane is designed, it's designed so that the center of gravity is forward, okay, of where the lift is generated. So what does that do? Well, you're pulling down here, you're pulling up there. Where does the nose tend to want to go based on that? Where's the nose want to go?
Down.
Down. Down. Okay, let me exaggerate it. Let's say the center of gravity is up here, and I'm pulling down here, and I'm pulling up here. Where's the nose going?
Very down.
Very down, right? So anytime the center of gravity is forward, if I pull here and I pull here, I'm tilting the airplane that way, right? Okay. So the nose wants to go down. So that means we have what we call a nose down pitching moment. Nose down pitching moment. That nose wants to pitch down. So that means when we're flying, this is what the plane wants to do this. Why doesn't it? Because we got this back here. We got that horizontal stabilizer applying a little bit of a down force to counteract that. The nose is wanting to pitch down, so we hold the tail down this way to counteract it. Well, let's say that we have a down force of, I'm going to exaggerate this, 200 pounds. Okay. What does the airplane weigh? How much lift is being generated? Nope. Okay, so total lift has to encompass the weight of the airplane.
You mean 1,200?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Sorry. But I'll show you how we get that to 2,200. Okay. So total lift has to encompass, so we say the forces are in equilibrium. Really, and it is, because you've got 1,000 pounds of weight plus you've got 200 pounds of down force. Okay, but the weight of the airplane is only 1,000, but the down force is 1,200. Therefore, the up force, the lifting force, has to be 1,200. So they're in equilibrium. Okay? All right. When you turn an airplane, we were talking about steep turns earlier, right, Aiden? And we said in steep turns, you have to use a little, or in turns in general, you have to use a little bit of back pressure to hold the airplane level. Because when the wings are level, this is the guy you want to see. Okay. When the wings are level, and in this scenario, let's say this is the scenario. We got 1,200 pounds of force down and 1,200 pounds of force up. Okay. When we bank, we put the airplane in a bank. Okay. Now, what's going to happen if we don't pull back a little bit is we'll turn, but we will descend. If it's just a little bit of bank, it'll be a slow little descent as we turn. If it's a lot of bank, it'll be a lot of descent as we turn. In order to keep the descent from happening, we have to pitch up a little bit. We have to increase that angle of attack just a little bit, okay? And the reason for that is this. If you look at the airplane, if you look at the plane like this, there's our plane flying at us or away from us or whatever, okay? In this example, we have a total down force of 1,200 pounds, right? Therefore, we need a correcting upward force or opposite force of 1,200 pounds in the other direction, right? So that's what we've got drawn right here, all right? When you turn the airplane, when you bank the airplane, I'll exaggerate this. When you bank the airplane left or right, okay, we're still going to have our force in this direction of 1,200 pounds in this case, or 1,200 pounds in this case, all right? But you have a horizontal, the reason that we turn, we have something called a horizontal component of lift. So lift always acts perpendicular to the wing, all right? So my wing's like this. If I do like that, lift is acting in this direction. You have a component now going this way, but you also have to have a component that opposes gravity. So you've got this one, and you've got one going this way. And if you draw that vector only as long as in a length of this up to here, well, you have a turning component like that. So we're turning, but we're descending through that turn. Does that make sense? So I have to pull back a little bit more to get a little more of that in it. Now we're turning level. We have a level turn. If I look at the resultant force of that, the centrifugal force, who's been on the rides at the fair where you get spin around, you get stuck in the back of whatever. All right, here's that centrifugal force this way. Okay? The length of this vector is longer than the length of that vector. Therefore, the force I feel is 1,200 plus some additional force of gravity. That's the G-force that we feel. So in the case of the turn, we have to all of a sudden arbitrarily lift more than 1,200 pounds. We have to do that. We've got to increase the angle of attack. Our lift has to increase because we've increased our aerodynamic weight. Got higher. Does that make some sense? The way that's drawn? Okay.
So when the 1200, so assuming that speed is unchanged, or airspeed at least is unchanged, then, and you go to say a 45-degree bank angle, that 1,200 pounds of lift, isn't that going this way rather than this way?
Not sure. I'm not sure what you mean.
So, given the aerodynamic forces on the wing.
Let me do this.
Okay.
Let me draw these in a different color.
Yeah. So if the aircraft was level like it is
Yep.
up there,
Yep.
right, at the same airspeed,
Yep.
then you're generating 1,200 pounds of lift straight up, right,
Yep.
perpendicular to the wing.
Yep.
If you bank it
Yep.
45 degrees,
Uh-huh.
isn't that 1,200 pounds now going that way?
It is.
And then you have less
No, so look.
going straight up.
All right, so let's draw our 1,200 pound vectors. First of all, vectors. Everybody know what a vector is? A vector is a direction with magnitude.
Right.
Okay, so when I draw an arrow, it's a vector. So if this vector is going in that direction at a magnitude of 1,200,
Right.
it has an opposing vector opposite the same length, 1,200 units, and opposite. So that's what we had when the wings were level.
Right.
As soon as we do this, if we don't pull back,
Right.
then we still have that, and we have a 1,200 pound vector going this way
Oh, okay, I see.
and that way. That sets up a horizontal component of lift, so we are turning, but we're descending through the turn.
Okay.
So we have to pull a little bit more. We got to pull a little bit more so that we have a level turn.
Okay. Yeah.
And the steeper the bank,
Required.
the longer that vector gets, which means the longer the resultant in the opposite direction vector gets. And when you turn, this is trigonometric, this is a trigonometry thing. If you turn 60 degrees, you double the load. So at 60 degrees, you're going to double the load. If here we weigh 4,000 pounds, here we weigh 8,000 pounds at 60 degrees. Okay, so it's a 2G. It's a 2G increase, or it's a 1G increase. It's a 2G total load. And stall speed increases by 40%. So if your stall speed is 50 like this, it's 70 when you get into a 60-degree bank turn. You increase your stall speed by 70. When you increase the load factor, you don't increase the stall speed by 70. When you increase the load factor, you increase stall speed. When you increase the load factor by 2, stall speed increases by 40%. These are just trigonometric relationships. But you need, as a pilot, that's a rote one. That one you want to remember. Okay.
When you start making these turns and stuff, is there like a rudder angle indicator or some kind of?
Yeah, bank angle? Sure, yeah, right here. Attitude
Oh,
indicator.
okay.
Yep, attitude indicator will give you your bank angle. If you have an attitude indicator. You don't need this, we don't need this to fly an airplane. Look outside the window.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering if there's like a level or something that.
Yeah, no, that's what you, if you want to know the exact bank angle, you can look there to look at the bank angle. Yeah, okay. All right. Lift, how do we generate lift? How about that one? I kind of jumped right past lift and went right to that. How do we generate lift?
Through the use of an airfoil that generates lower pressure up above the wing as air is moving over it, and you have a higher pressure down below.
Okay, so that's the answer. So what is lift? What is lift? Lift is, or how does a wing generate lift? The quick answer, the way to explain this one, if somebody asks you, if the examiner asks you what is lift. Lift is a differential in air pressure above and below the wings. Low pressure on top, high pressure on bottom. The high pressure pushes the wing up and we go up. That's lift. So we generate a pressure differential around the airfoil. And the way we generate the pressure differential around the airfoil well, let's first talk about an airfoil. So this is a typical airfoil, what we would maybe call a flat bottom airfoil, unsymmetrical airfoil. And if you draw an imaginary line between the trailing edge and the leading edge would be the geographic tangent of that curve right there, okay? That would be the chord, and that's just an imaginary line. You can just kind of look at a wing and kind of visualize a line that would connect the tangent of the curve to the trailing edge. That'd be your chord line, okay? As this airfoil is moving through the air, or as air is moving past the airfoil, a wing can generate lift without moving. If the airplane's sitting out here on the ramp and the wind starts blowing 50 miles an hour, guess what that airplane's going to do? It's going to fly. That plane doesn't have to be moving. You have to have wind relative to the wing. You have to have relative wind. So if relative wind is moving, let's say in this direction right here, let's say that is the relative wind. Past the airfoil, so that could be that the plane is sitting there steady, or the wind and the wind is moving, or the plane is moving through still air. Either one, it's relative. Okay, the angle between that relative wind and the chord line is the angle of attack. The angle of attack tells us the angle of attack for a given airfoil defines the amount of lift that airfoil is going to generate up to critical angle of attack where the wing will stall. Okay, so what's happening is airflow is moving around this airfoil. So as this air comes in here and hits, and let's just say it hits at where the chord line, at the very leading edge of the airfoil, which it doesn't have to. I mean, if the plane's flying like this, that air's hitting way down here, right? If you're at a high angle of attack, right? But in this case, let's say it's hitting right here, right at the leading edge, okay? Some of that air is going to go over the top, and some of that air is going to go under the bottom. And we call this point right here the stagnation point. And we call it stagnation point because the air actually comes to a zero velocity right there. The air stops moving right there. And it has to make a decision. I'm either going to go that way or I'm going to go that way. Okay, so that's the stagnation point. Because of the shape of the airfoil, and I'll get into this more next week, I'm not going to get too deep into it now, the flow of air above and below the airfoil causes low pressure up here and high pressure under here. And so you have a net force in that direction pushing that wing up. And the higher the angle of attack, so if you have a wing like this or a wing like this, let's say, and that's the relative wind, and that's the relative wind, you can see the angle of attack versus the angle of attack, right? The greater angle of attack. The higher the angle of attack, the lower the pressure on the top. So the more force up you get. Okay? So if we want to generate a higher, not lift, but a higher coefficient, I'm going to get into this formula next week, a higher, when we do this, when this happens, when we're increasing this angle of attack, what we're doing is we're increasing this coefficient. We're not increasing the lift, right? This big L right here, that is, in the example I drew before, the 1,200 pounds. Let's say the 1,200 pounds, okay? If I want to stay airborne, I have to generate 1,200 pounds, okay? All right? If I'm flying at 110, picture the example I drew up here a while ago. We weigh 1,000 plus 200 pounds of downforce here. If I want to generate 110, I want to fly at 110 miles per hour, what's my total lift? 1,200 pounds, right? What if I'm flying at 80 miles per hour? What's my total lift? 1,200 pounds. Is this different?
Yes.
Way different. It's not that I'm increasing lift by doing this. This isn't changing. That's changing. Okay? That's a key thing to understand. All right. As we increase the angle of attack, we greatly change the pressure differential. The bigger the differential, the more and more and more in lift we generate until we reach an angle that now the airflow can't go over the wing anymore. That's the stall. And we call that angle the critical angle of attack. Once we get it so big, the air hits the stagnation point and says, nope, I can't do it. I can't get around. In fact, wind tunnel studies will show that in high angles of attack like this, prior to the stall, the stagnation point can be way down here and the air actually retreats and goes up and over in that direction. It actually backtracks. But there's a point where that just won't happen anymore. That's called the stall. That critical angle of attack. Okay, I'll get real deep into that next week. Just bring up any questions. Any further questions? Anybody? What are you guys working on right now in your flight training that you might have a question on? Where are you at in your training?
We're getting ready for solo.
You're getting ready for solo? Okay. All right. All right. What are your personal minimums?
It was 25 knots of wind, 15 knots of crosswind, 2,000 foot ceiling, and 3 miles of visibility, 3 nautical miles of visibility.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about personal minimums. When you start training, when you're with your instructor, you don't really worry too much about the conditions outside, right? Because you got your instructor with you.
Yep.
But when you solo, you better be worried about the conditions outside because you're by yourself. You're pilot in command. So we have this thing, and personal minimums don't go away just because you have become a certificated private pilot or whatever. Okay, personal minimums stay with you through your whole flying career, and they're a living, breathing thing. They change. They change with proficiency. If you haven't flown in a long time, you better tighten up your minimums. If you're real comfortable, you've been flying a lot in whatever type of airplane, you can expand your minimums. And your minimums will depend on the aircraft that you're flying. So you might, let's say you got your license and you fly 3 or 4 different types of aircraft. You're gonna have 3 or 4 different sets of personal minimums for the airplanes that you're flying. They're all gonna be different, or could be potentially different, right? All right, so what do we look at? We wanna look at total wind. That's one, total wind, okay? Crosswind, ceilings, visibility. Those are the big ones, right? Anything else? I would put up here gust factor. Should have put it up there. That's another one. Gust factor should go up there with wind. Those are things you want to look at for personal minimums. All right. So ceilings and visibility, these aren't going to be, I hesitate to say this, but they're not going to be aircraft specific, but they could be. Because you're flying an airplane like this that doesn't fly that fast, well, your visibilities could be a lot lower. If you're flying something that's typically doing 200 knots, you better have better visibilities. You're going moving through the air a lot faster, right? Okay, so these are aircraft specific as well, but not maybe as much as the others. So ceilings and visibility, what do we look at there? What's the minimum? We're all VFR pilots here, right? We're all learning how to fly. So there's nobody here that's got an instrument rating yet, except for me, right? So what's your minimum visibility per the FAA?
It's 1,000 feet AGL.
Visibility.
Oh, visibility, I'm sorry, 3 nautical miles.
Statute miles. 3 statute miles. Visibility is the only thing that the FAA does in statute miles. Everything else is nautical miles.
It's freaking frustrating.
The statute miles. They do that in statute miles. The reason so why, you might ask, why, right? Because you always ask why. All right, why would the FAA only do statute miles or use statute miles for visibility?
This is more commonly used for distance.
That's why. That's why. Because we in the United States, we could say, well, that's about a mile. Because we're familiar with those distances because we're driving cars.
Yep.
We're not going to say, well, that's about a nautical mile. What the heck's a nautical mile look like driving up? Nobody knows, right? It's like that skit. Sometimes 7, sometimes 6, sometimes 3. Anyway. All right, so visibility minimum is 3 miles. Does that mean that's what yours should be for a student pilot? 3 miles visibility?
No, it should probably be a little bit higher.
Yeah, it should probably be a little higher.
Depending on the aircraft, I mean, like these really don't fly super fast.
Yeah.
Like you were talking
Are you
about.
comfortable with 3 miles visibility in this airplane?
I guess it would have to depend on what I was doing. And,
Okay, that's good. Depends on what you're doing.
yeah.
All
I mean,
right.
for pattern work, sure, no problem.
Okay.
But for like if I was going to do a cross country flight, I wouldn't fly for 3 miles
Nope.
visibility by that years.
Nope. I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do it for less than 5.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah, so that's a good place to start. Visibility, 5 statute miles, something like that. But again, it does depend on what you're doing. If you are staying right here in the pattern, there's 3 miles visibility and there's no ceilings or whatever the case may be, that's probably okay. Yeah. But if you're going out, yeah, 5 miles, as a student pilot, I wouldn't let any of my students go out with less than 5 miles. What about ceilings? What's the minimum ceiling for VFR to be legal? Legal visual flight rules. What's the ceiling?
1,000 AGL.
1,000 foot AGL. That's the minimum. What's yours going to be?
The lowest I've flown in right now is 2,000 AGL.
2,000 AGL. So pattern work. You want to do pattern work.
Yep.
What's 2,000 AGL?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be a good one for pattern work. What if you want to go out in the practice area?
I'd want minimum 2,500. Actually, no, I'd want 3,500, 4,000.
Okay, that's good. See, that's the way you want to think about that. You don't want to get caught out there, right? But once you're a private pilot, and let's say you're very proficient, you've been flying a lot, well, I don't know, maybe you keep that, but maybe these can come down. Maybe that can get down to 2,000 feet, depending on where you're going. You know, I'm flying over to Lockhart. Well, I don't need 5,000 feet to get to Lockhart.
No.
You know what I mean? I'm flying to Dallas. Well, maybe I want 5,000 feet,
Yeah.
right? So it depends on what you're doing. You have to think through what's happening. All right. All right. Let's talk about wind. This is the ones that really kind of get people. They can't kind of figure this out.
I learned it hard last week.
All right. So total wind versus crosswind versus gust factor. These are 3 totally separate things that you need to be thinking about. Okay. Total wind just means what's the total wind? What's the wind right now? Somebody pull out ForeFlight and tell me what the wind and direction and all that stuff is right now, and if there's any gust.
22. Got as high as 36 last night or this morning. Let's see. As of, I'm I'm still showing, it's 350 at 18,
Okay, 350 at 18.
gust to 30.
Okay, this is a good example right here. All right, 350 degrees at 18 gusting to 30. That's the winds right now as of however long ago, however old that is. It's less than an hour old for sure. All right. 350, is that true or magnetic?
It's magnetic.
That's magnetic. Everybody know the difference between true and magnetic?
Like, like Greenwich and then the North Pole.
Not Greenwich, but North Pole is true north. So if I said to you, hey, let's walk, fly, drive, sail north, intuitively in your mind, what you hear me saying is let's travel towards the North Pole. That's, if you say I want to go north, you're saying I want to go towards Santa Claus house, right? That's what you're saying.
And that's true north?
That's true north, okay? Because that is the point, the geographic point where the lines of longitude come together. What instrument, no matter what type of navigation you're doing, what instrument do you use to achieve that?
Magnetic compass.
A magnetic compass.
Yeah.
And where's that point?
Not north.
Not north. It points to where the magnetic forces come out of the globe. So here you have true north, right there. There's the United States. A little larger than it actually is, I think, on the globe. Okay, so we're down here in Texas somewhere. If we want to go to, we want to go there. That's where we want to go from here, where we're at in New Braunfels. Okay, and we get in the car, truck, airplane, boat, whatever, walk, and we get a compass, and we keep that thing pointed north. And we're walking north, and we're walking north, and we're walking north. Here's where we go. Over there. Because the magnetic forces don't come from the geographic North Pole. They come from over here, something called magnetic north. Okay? All right. When we get to navigation, we'll talk more about that. So there's a variance here. My point was this 350 means that if this is 360 magnetic, this is 350, that means the winds are coming from this direction, not this direction. That makes sense? Okay. Why is that important to understand? Why? Always ask why. Always ask why. Why is that important to understand? Why do we care?
Where to position your aircraft in the air or what?
Okay. What runway do you think we would use? Do everybody know the runways at this airport? Here's the runways at this airport. We have a runway. They look kind of, let me draw it a little smaller. Like this and like that. So we have runway 3, 5, 1, 7, 3, 3, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, and 1, 3. Those are our runways right there. What's the significance of runway numbers?
They point approximately to the
Magnetic north. Okay, so why do we think we want the surface winds to be out of magnetic north? So that we can calculate that right there. So we know, hey, if the winds are coming from 350, what runway do you think we want to use? 35? Because we want the wind right down the runway, right? Okay, so that's why they're magnetic north. Okay. Now, a little foreshadowing to navigation. When we get up to altitude and we're cruising and we get our winds aloft, where do you think those directions come from? True north. Because when we want to go someplace, if we want to go to the North Pole, where do you think, if we want to travel north, where do we want to travel? To the North Pole. Therefore, once I'm up there, I want to know what the winds are from true north so I can calculate my wind correction angles. So when you get winds,
Deviation and variation.
that's when when we get into navigation, we'll talk about that, right? So when you get winds in aviation, if they're surface winds, they're always from magnetic north so that we can line them up with runways, because runways are lined up magnetically. And when we get up to altitude, they're true because we're typically traveling somewhere in a true direction. Okay? All right. What was the question? I got so far out. I got so far down a rabbit hole.
You asked me.
Oh, we're doing this. Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's our winds: 350, 350 at 18 gusting to 30, and we're talking about wind. All right. Total wind. First of all, you have to ask: is there any limitations on the airplane? Are there any wind limitations on the airplane? Because there could be. Depends on the airplane you're flying. Some airplanes have total wind limitations on them. The G3s that we have total wind limitations on them. Do you know what they are?
Oh gosh, it was like I want to say it was like 25 knots.
25 knots. 25 knots total wind. 25 knots. So it doesn't matter what direction they're coming from. If it's blowing more than 25 knots, it's illegal to fly the plane. Will the plane fly?
Maybe.
Well, no, it'll fly. It'll absolutely fly. But if you wreck, will the insurance company pay me? Nope, because you're flying it illegally, right? Okay, so look at your total wind limitation on the airplane itself. So in this scenario, now the GXs don't have any total wind limitation on them. So today, if this is truly what we have, would you be comfortable flying a G3?
No.
No. That's our steady wind, that's our gust factor. So you have to assume that you're going to get that condition right there.
I might fly today.
Okay. Well, it doesn't mean it'll be that when you fly either.
No, it's supposed to die down.
Yeah, right. Okay. So total wind, you got to look at the total wind. So in this scenario, I'm looking at that. Yeah, I'm looking at that. That's my steady component. That's my gusting component. All right. So I have a gust factor of what there? While it's there, we'll talk about gust factor. What's the gust factor in these winds?
Isn't it just the difference?
Yeah, it's 12.
Okay, yeah.
So the gust factor is 12. Gust factor is 12 there. All right. So as long as we're looking at that, let's look at gust factor. That should be a personal limitation. Is 12 too much of a gust factor?
I wouldn't feel comfortable flying in that,
Okay.
so I would say yes for me.
Okay. What's the significance of gust factor from an aerodynamic standpoint? Why?
Because it can cause.
Because she's always going to ask why.
Oh, sorry.
Wait. So like, you're saying the aircraft was 25, right?
Yeah.
Are we looking at subtraction?
So for gust factor, yes. So if this is the steady component and that's the gusting component, the difference is 12 knots. So there's a factor of 12 knots. Well, but I'm just talking about gust factor. So there's three things. Total wind. All right. From a personal limit, you have to ask, is the airplane limited? If the airplane's not limited, now you say, am I limited? Okay, so let's just assume the airplane's not limited. Are you comfortable in 30 knot total winds? Okay, if you're not comfortable, that's beyond your limitation. Even though the steady portion is 18, and every once in a while it will gust to 30, and then it goes back to 18. And then it'll gust to 30, then it goes back to 18. You always want to take the high side. Because if what Murphy says is at the point where you're trying to land or take off, it's going to be 30. That's what Murphy says, right? Okay. All right, well, let's say the winds were, all right, would you be comfortable with the total wind? Well, let me ask you, what's your total wind? What are you comfortable with?
25.
25, okay. 25 knots, okay. All right. And what's your gust factor?
For a sustained 25 knot wind?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Gust factor is totally separate.
I would say 10.
10.
More than 10.
Gust factor 10. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. Let's say that the wind is, we'll forget direction. Let's say that the velocity of the wind is 5, gusting to 10. So this is my steady, this is my gust. What's the gust factor?
5.
5, okay. What if the winds were 10, gusting to 15? 5. 15, gusting to 20. 5. Okay, so my gust factor is not changing. My winds are changing, but my gust factor is not changing. Okay, you good with 20? Total wind, or yeah, this? Okay. What if the winds are 5, gusting to 20? So we have a high in wind of the same, but you've got a wildly different gust factor.
Yeah.
It's very important to recognize why that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Why is that dangerous?
Well, because you can get some very unpredictable winds when you're coming, especially when you're coming into land.
Okay.
That actually happened to me on Saturday, in the very first landing coming in on 3-5, and it was on a stabilized approach, everything was fine, and all of a sudden that right wing just dipped
Okay.
like that, about 30 degrees instantly.
Yeah.
And, you know, thankfully it was about 150 feet above the runway, so I was able to get it corrected, and it was fine. You know, had to clean my shorts, but it was fine. And, but, I mean, that kind of thing can happen in these gusty,
Yeah.
you know, and if you got a crosswind, it's even worse.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. So here's the reality of what can happen here. Let's say, let's go back and talk about stalls real quick. So what is a stall?
It's seeing critical angle.
Sitting critical angle attack. We typically will associate in a 1G condition, which when we're landing and taking off, are we doing that under additional load or are we just in 1G? Are we loading up the wing on takeoff and landing?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, we shouldn't be. We should be in a 1G condition. All right? If you're coming into land, let's say, you're landing.
yeah, no.
You're in a 1G condition, right? Okay. We associate stalls with speeds, right? We say VS or VS1, VSO or VS1. And we do that because the critical angle of attack will occur at a specific speed when we are in a 1G condition. If we're banking or loading the wing, that goes away. Remember, stall speed increases as we load the wing up, as we increase the wing loading. But in a 1G condition, we're coming in land, wings are nice and level. We're not yanking and banking. We're not doing anything crazy. We're landing. Nice, stable approach. Okay. In that scenario, we associate stall with a specific speed. And when we have the flaps all the way down, what is that speed in both? No, stall speed.
Oh, stall speed is 55.
Nope, flaps down.
Oh, 45.
45. Okay, flaps down or 45. What speed do we approach at? What's our approach speed?
70.
70, okay. Generally speaking, we say approach speed, unless the manufacturer gives us an approach speed, we will say 1.3 times VSO. So VSO is 45, so somebody get a calculator, tell me what 1.3 times 45 is. It's about 60. 58 and a half. Let's call it 60 because I'm not going to be able to get 58 and a half on the airspeed indicator. So we'll call it 60. Okay. So if you're flying the G3, the manufacturer, in the book, it actually says 60. The GX, they increased it. Okay? And they increased it not because there's a different speed here, because they recognize that 60 is dangerous. And so I arbitrarily make you guys fly your approaches at 70 and tell you fly it at 70, because 60 is dangerous. All right, so now let me explain why that is. If you're using a 1.3 times VSO approach speed and you're flying in at 60, let's say here's your runway, here's your approach, you're coming down your final approach path right there and you're doing 60. Okay, and we have winds at let's say 10 gusting to 15. 10 gusting to 15. So steady wind is 10. Every once in a while you get a gust of 15. All right. Well, let's assume you're doing 60 here, and you're coming down this, and you're in the gust. The wind is hitting the airplane at 15, and you're indicating 60 on your airspeed indicator. Then all of a sudden the gust goes away. Okay, you're not doing 60 anymore. You're doing 55. Is that above stall speed? Well, yeah, it's 10. It's 10 knots above stall, or 10 mile an hour above stall speed. Yeah, right. But you got closer to stall speed. All right. Well, what if it's 10 gusting to 25? Now you're in the gust, and you're indicating 60, and the gust goes away. You instantly stall and fall out of the sky. Instantly fall out of the sky because of the gust factor. So the bigger the gust factor, the more dangerous it is. Okay? So gust factor is really important to recognize from a stall standpoint why that's so important.
This doesn't have to do with like bad weather, it's just wind.
This is just wind. Yeah, this is just wind. Yep, just the wind, right. Okay, so gust factor, 10. I might cut that down a little bit as a student pilot.
Okay.
I'd probably cut that down a little bit. All right, now let's talk about crosswind. Is everybody with me so far on how we're going through all this stuff? All right, let's talk about crosswind. What do we mean by crosswind? Let's say, I'm going to leave those winds up there. Let's say that we have a runway 3.5 here, so if these were the conditions, we'd be using 3.5, right? But let's say 3.5 is closed. They got it noted closed, they're doing something with it, or plane had a flat tire. That happens a lot. And you're in the pattern, you're using 3.5, and all of a sudden, oh, we got a plane with a flat tire, you got to use 3.1 now. Now, suddenly you have a crosswind. All right, what is your crosswind? So here's 3.1. 3.1. Here's the wind coming from 3.5. 3.5, right? How much crosswind do we have? And what we're really wanting to find out is what's the crosswind component, right? So the way we do that is we take the difference between 3.10 and 3.50. We have 40 degrees right here, right? We have a 40-degree difference, all right? The wind is 18, gusting to 30, okay? Well, what I want to know is when we calculate a crosswind, really we're calculating two things. We're calculating a headwind component and a crosswind component. Any vector can be broken down into two component vectors. So if I have a vector, here's a vector right here. There's a vector. There's the start of the vector, there's the end of the vector. This component can be broken down into two vectors. I have a vector here and a vector here. That vector and this vector can be broken down into those two vectors. I can do the same thing with this. So as I'm landing in this direction right here, okay, I have of this wind, I have a vector that hits me like this, and I have a vector that hits me like that. This is my crosswind component. That's what I want. That's what I want to know. When I talk about crosswind, total crosswind, this is what I'm trying to calculate. And I have to calculate. I can't just look at 30 and 40 degrees and know right away what my crosswind component is. We have to calculate it, right? Okay, how do we do that?
You can take the 40 degrees divided by 360 divided by 360 divided by 40, and then you can use that to then times the wind.
Okay, so you can, there's easier ways.
Yeah.
Okay. What's that?
Look at your sheet.
Look at the sheet. You got one with you? You got? Yeah, grab a sheet there. All right, so before you guys fly, you always grab one of these, right? You ever use that? That's a crosswind component chart.
Not as much as I should.
Okay, so you should use that, right? And so what you want to do by doing that, every time you fly, when you start getting to level 5, you should know, hey, what's my component of crosswind I'm dealing with today? So that you get a sense of what can I handle. 5 knots, can I handle 5 knots pretty comfortably? Can I handle 7, 8, 9, 10? But if you're not constantly, well, it was windy today. Okay, well, there was a lot of crosswind. Well, how much? Well, I don't know. Well, calculate it so you know how much you can handle, what you're comfortable with in that particular airplane. So in this case, you know how to use that?
Yes.
Tell me what the crosswind component is. So you got 40 degrees at 30, because anytime you do the crosswind component, never use this. Always use the high side, because you have to assume when at the point of touchdown, that's what you're going to be dealing with, because Murphy says that.
At 30, it's 19.
19 knot crosswind.
Yeah. No, thank you.
That's a huge crosswind. Okay, now you have to ask, does the airplane have crosswind limitations?
Yes. It's 15.
It's 15 knots. Okay, now there's two kinds of crosswind limitations. You have demonstrated crosswind components, and we have crosswind limitations, max crosswind limitation. Those are two separate things. Most airplanes have what are called demonstrated crosswind components, and some airplanes have maximum crosswind components. The G3 has a maximum crosswind component of 15 knots. The GX has a demonstrated crosswind component of 15 knots. They're different. Maximum crosswind component means just that. You can't fly. So today, really, if it's truly these are the winds, the G3s are pretty much grounded today. if those winds
It
continue.
was true as 53 minutes when I looked at it.
Yeah, and they may change a little bit. The GX is not. Okay, so a maximum crosswind component, what that means is that a test pilot has flown that model airplane, that model of aircraft, in a 15-knot direct crosswind and was able to maintain directional control throughout the landing. Or the manufacturer showed through mathematical calculation that directional control could be maintained at that component. One of those two. Okay? So can you fly an aircraft that has a maximum demonstrated crosswind component of 15 knots with a crosswind of 20 knots? Is it legal? It's legal because it's a demonstrated crosswind component. So what they're saying is, we've demonstrated that at 15 knots you can maintain directional control. Anything above that, you're on your own. But they're not saying you can't do it.
I see. The terminology.
The terminology is important. Demonstrated crosswind component means we've demonstrated it can be done at this speed, at this velocity, this amount of crosswind. Maximum crosswind component without the demonstrated word in there, that's a hard line. Okay? So you have to be careful when you're reading the manufacturer. All right, let's take a break. We're 5 minutes past break time. Okay, I think we're all back.
They're really neat aircraft.
Okay.
They have a lot of power.
Let's finish up the discussion on this. I want to finish on. We haven't finished crosswind. We have discussed, all right, crosswind component. So when we say crosswind, we're not saying what's the crosswind. The crosswind's 40 degrees. That's not what we're saying. We have to calculate the angular difference, the velocity, and then come up with the component, what's this portion right here, right? And that's our crosswind. We want to know how much of the wind, the total wind, is hitting us directly at 90 degrees. That's what we want to know. Now the question is, let's assume you're on a runway. Let's assume you have this situation. Just make it easy here. We'll call this 3.6. 3.6, so 360. You got wind like this, 030, or you got wind like this at 330. So you have 30 degrees, right? So the component is going to be the same. It's either from the left or from the right. Is there a difference? Yes? Okay, why? You're on it. You're onto it. You're onto it. The left turning tendencies. Yeah, I knew what you meant when you were doing that. It's because of the left turning tendencies. That makes a difference. Because we already have a force that's causing a left yaw. Okay, so that being the case, I'm taking off here, or I'm landing here, whatever. Would I prefer that wind from the right or that wind from the left? Which one's preferable?
From the left.
You prefer it from the left?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll even out that left turning tendency.
Okay. Everybody agree with that?
I don't think so.
You think so? Okay. Tim, what do you think?
I would want a right.
Yeah, right. You want it from the right. You don't want it from the left. You want it from the right. Okay, this confuses a lot of. When I hire instructors, I ask them this question. About 80% of them can't get it right.
I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, because they've never thought about it. They've never been taught this. But there's a large percentage of them that don't get this right. All right, so let's think about it. What is an air? First of all, looking at this airplane longitudinally, looking at it from like this, looking down the longitudinal line, where's the center of gravity typically? Right up in here someplace? Yeah. All right, now just think about the surface area of this airplane. Is there more surface area in front or behind that center of gravity? Behind. So if wind's blowing here, is it going to do this or is it going to do that? So I'm taking off. And I got wind coming from, first of all, left turning tendency is causing this, and wind is causing it to be worse. It's pretty simple when you think about it, right? Yeah, right. So I prefer this because I've got left turning tendencies causing this and wind counteracting it. So, understanding that, the way to remember it is you want the crosswind from the right because that's the right crosswind. That's the way to think about it. That's the right one. I want it from the right. That's the right one. Then you can back into why that is. But a crosswind from the left is worse. Now, if you're flying a jet, and you know, it don't make no difference. You don't have any turning tendencies. Or if you're flying a glider, doesn't make any difference. The problem here is that propeller. That's what's causing the issue. Okay? All right. So I say that to say that when you're dealing with your crosswind limitations, you need two. You need a left one and a right one. Okay? And if your max, let's say your max from the right is 10 knots, you can't handle 10 knots from the left. If all you can handle is 10 from the right, you cannot handle 10 from the left. Okay? Promise you. All right. Okay. Next question. Everybody get personal limits and why we do them? Okay. And when you get to your stage 1 phase check with me, which sounds like we're going to be doing pretty soon, with me or Sebastian, we're going to be asking these questions. So be ready to defend your answers.
You got it.
Okay. What else? Nothing? I got nothing. All right, Tim, you're up now.
My question is, on your, it's a two-part question. Number one, on your check ride, all your years of experience, has there been one particular maneuver or a couple of maneuvers that has been seems to be a challenge for people? I mean, that in your experience, or is it just too ballpark? Is there any that stick out in your mind that give students, new pilots problems?
From a maneuver standpoint,
Yes, sir.
short field, and landings in general. Landings in general.
That's
Directional control, maintaining directional control on landing.
The one that gives people the most
Directional control.
unforgiving, that the examiner is unforgiving on. Or-
Okay, so there's a reason though that they're really looking at that, and we've recently had some failures, check ride failures, as a result of the straw that broke the camel's back was unable to maintain directional control during landing, throughout the landing. When you look at accident and incident reports, the majority, so when we look at accidents or incidents, we break the flying down into phases. You know, you've got your taxi, takeoff, climb, cruise, descent, loiter, all those different phases. The majority of occurrences are on takeoff and landing. And as a result of that, the fatalities associated with them are very low. You don't have a lot of, thankfully, the area where we have the most occurrences has the least amount of fatalities. The reason is you're going slow. You take off and landing. And the causal factor in most of those, if you read the NTSB report or you read the FAA's reports, it'll say loss of directional control on the runway. People run off the runway because they're not maintaining directional control. As a result, the examiners are very keen on making sure you know how to keep the nose pointed down the runway. I asked earlier today, what's the most important flight control surface on the airplane? Rudder. Because you have to maintain directional control. And we do that with our feet, not our hands. Our feet. Your hands won't do anything. Unless you're in an air coupe. If you're in an air coupe, it's your hands. Yeah. Okay. Does that
Yes,
make
sir.
sense?
And then follow up on that, the second question is, on the oral examination, is there anything that seems to,
Oh.
I know that's a big broad.
Yeah,
but
people-
that you've heard through the years that people seem to have trouble you're always saying defending their position.
Okay, so-
You know,
Yep, so I would say of the subject areas that people are generally the most weak on, I would say weather.
okay.
Weather's the area where people are most weak. I wouldn't say that failures result from that weakness, but I would say that
You know
when I get debriefs from the examiners, they'll say weather was
Okay.
weak, weather was weak, pass or fail, weather was weak, weather was weak. That I get that a lot. Other than that, it's all over the place. It just depends.
That's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
getting close to, so I'm just trying
Yeah,
to you know, shore up my position.
yeah, I understand. Yep.
Bounce about the language question. As funny as it sounds, how realistic is it to use Microsoft Flight Simulator for practice language?
Okay, it's realistic. So here's what you're going to get out of Microsoft Flight Simulator. You're going to get sight picture. Sight picture is one of the two most important things about landing an airplane. The other is energy management. You could get some. You're not really going to get energy management out of that. You're going to get sight picture out of that. Sight picture is related, very tightly related to energy management, because if you can't see what's happening, you can't manage the energy. But you have to feel and hear the energy along with what you're seeing, the sight picture, to get a total energy management picture. So generally, flight simulators, Microsoft Flight Simulator, or any flight simulator, excels once you get to your instrument training. They're not as helpful for primary flight training. It doesn't mean they hurt you in any way, but they're not as helpful. But from the standpoint of navigation, they can be very helpful when you get into your navigation phase. Fly your cross country on the flight simulator, put some realistic winds in there, try and calculate how to calculate your wind correction angles, calculate your time, speed, distances as you go. They can be very helpful there. But the physical act of flying, the seat of the pants, the stick and rudder skills associated with flying an airplane, they're not as helpful. You need to feel the airplane. You need to feel the nose yawing left and the need for the right rudder. You just can't get that in a flight sim. Even if you have realistic turning tendencies turned on in Microsoft, or you have the winds turned on, you have to look at the ball to see what's happening. When you're flying an airplane, when you really learn how to fly the airplane, you never have to look at the ball. You feel it. And you can look at the ball to verify what you're feeling, but you feel it. You don't need to look there to know what input you need to put. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But from a landing standpoint, energy and sight picture. And they'll be different for every airplane you're flying. But once you understand the energy and the sight picture for the airplane that you're flying, okay? Once you know that, if you set up your approach and your landing with the right energy and the right sight picture, you might screw one up every now and then, okay? But if you set up for landing and you're off energy and off sight picture, you might make one every now and then. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah, if you have any other questions about flight simulator, let me know. I've got a full sim set up at home.
Oh,
yeah.
I've got everything.
Yeah.
You know, the yoke, the rudders, everything.
So the sight picture you could get out of that.
Okay.
You could get sight picture, especially if but what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to change the wind settings frequently. Don't just go with calm winds or the same wind all the time. You need different winds because that's going to change your sight picture.
I like to set mine up with the current conditions here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and just fly out of the Broncos
Yeah.
all the time. It's a great way to run the taxiways, the
Yeah.
runways, the terrain, because everything looks the same up there.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
like primarily helps you build up that confidence in terms of that picture.
yeah, but rudder pedals, rudder pedals, rudder pedals.
Yeah.
That's all I can tell
What do you fly? You have a CTLS? What do you, or a
We have a
Cessna?
flight design CTS.
CTLS. That's the closest thing to the Remos.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very close.
CTLS,
The only
yep.
thing that's a little misleading is that the airspeed is in kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
Not freaking miles per
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
Which is
Yes.
really annoying. But
What is the most common mistake that pilots do in general?
Wow.
I'd say like back to what we were doing a few weeks ago when we were talking about like macho and all those things.
Yeah, my head immediately went there. So it probably is attitudinal, you know, mindset, right? So most accidents occur, when you look back, any accident, aviation or otherwise, that occurs, if it's studied and you go back and you look at everything that occurred, you can find a chain of events leading up to that accident. And you can look and see at any point in time, if the operator or whoever simply broke one of those links, the accident would not have happened, right? We call that the accident chain, okay? When it comes to aviation accidents, you can usually look back and see that if the pilot had had the right thought processes going on in here, they would have been able to break that link, more than likely. So, to answer your question, I would probably say the biggest thing is mental. It's complacency. It's getting too comfortable and not recognizing the risk. There's a lot of risk in doing this. You ever heard that? Have you heard this? I've said this before. You hear people say the most dangerous part about flying is the drive to the airport. That's not true. That's true if you're flying to get on a commercial airliner. If you're flying here, this is way more dangerous than driving your car down I-35, statistically. There is more risk involved in doing what we're doing. Now, it's not as risky as riding your motorcycle down I-35, Tim, but you recognize the risk, you adjust for it, right? Okay, but there's a lot of risk in this. So you want to keep your eyes wide open, keep your brain clear, be aware of what's going on. Dangerous.
Also, another question. What is the accident chain?
What is the accident chain? What do I mean by accident chain? It's a chain of events that leads up to the accident. So,
What starts it is...
Depends on what the accident is. Let's say an example might be most stall spin accidents occur where? Where do stall spin accidents occur?
Pattern.
Where?
Landing.
Landing where?
Making the turn from base to final.
Base to final turn. That's where it happens. Base to final turn. All right. By far, that's the thing. So let's go back. So I'm doing this to show you an example accident chain. Okay. Or potentially breaking an accident chain. All right. Let's say we're landing here. So the wind's blowing generally in this direction, so that we're landing on this runway. Let's say that the wind is blowing like this. That's the wind direction. Okay, so we got a little bit of a crosswind there, right? But generally, the headwind is using this runway. Okay, so when you're on downwind here, so here's our pattern. There's our pattern right there. Base to final turns cause stalls because usually the pilot will overshoot the final and get into a steep bank trying to get back at low altitude, start pull, install the airplane, and crash, spin, and crash right about there, trying to get back to keep from overshooting the runway. Okay. One causal factor is the wind condition here. So now just think about ground speed. Now let's say you do a right-hand pattern. Look at the base leg right here. Look at your ground speed here versus your ground speed there. Which one's faster based on that wind?
Left pattern.
You're going to be flying across the ground faster here than you are here. Okay? All right, so I teach this to my students. If you fly a tight pattern, that means when you turn here, you're going to get there quickly. And it can catch you by surprise, and you overbank and pull and see the nose drop. Now you go the other direction and a little down rudder and roll that thing over into a spin just that fast. And it just catches you just that fast. And you're 200-300 feet, you can't recover from that. It's over. You end up in a skidding turn. Skidding turn is, do not skid an airplane in the pattern, especially on that turn right there. Do not skid an airplane in that turn right there. Don't skid an airplane ever. unless you're doing aerobatics, right? But especially right there. All right. So accident chain, you're in the pattern doing pattern work, or you're flying into this airport. You come in over here, you get on the downwind. Okay, what I teach my students is if I'm on the downwind, first of all, fly good patterns. So geometrically, what's the relationship between the downwind and the runway? Geometrically. Whether the downwind is here or here or here or here. Geometrically, what is the relationship between this line and that line? They're parallel. They're parallel. We're not flying in towards the runway. We're not flying out against. We're flying a ground path that is parallel to the runway. How do we do that when the wind is blowing? By crabbing the airplane one way or the other. So if I'm on the downwind, this all starts by flying good patterns all the time, being consistent, to be diligent in flying a nice parallel downwind. If I fly a parallel downwind in this condition right here, the only way to do it is to point the nose over here. There's no other way to do it. If I don't, the wind's going to push me in towards the runway. That makes sense? So when I'm on downwind, if I'm nosing away, crabbing away from the runway, I think about dying right here in about a minute. And when I think about dying right here in a minute, I have just broken the link, and I'm not going to die right there. Does that make sense? So I took this chain. The chain is the wind is set up such that I'm going to have a fast downwind. And the more I'm crabbing, the worse it's going to be. Does that make sense? That's an example of an accident chain. I can, as the pilot, recognize the potential accident right here. And I can break the chain of events right now. And I can do it a couple ways. I can fly a wider downwind. I can maintain altitude, extend this such that if I do get pushed out, I don't care. I'm just going to come right back around and get on the center line. I can recognize, yeah, I don't like that at all. Boom, power in, just go around, do that again. What I'm not going to do is get stuck in the situation where I die because I wasn't thinking about it ahead of time. That's an accident chain. That's breaking the link. That make sense? Okay. All right. Other questions?
On a check ride, so I know that the textbook pattern is to, you get a 90-degree crosswind, 90-degree downwind, 90-degree base, 90-degree final.
Yep.
A lot of times when we've been practicing the pattern, it's making that turn at the key position.
Mm-hmm.
And-
Making the turn at the key position?
Yeah.
That'd be too tight.
I know, it's very tight.
Why would you make the turn at the key position? The key position in this scenario is right here.
Yeah.
Why would you turn there?
Well, because if the engine quits, then
Okay.
you're still going to be able to make.
Okay, all right.
So basically practicing, going straight to idle from there and
Okay.
in that short pattern. For a check ride, obviously you would never do that, right? It would just be, you would actually want to extend
It depends.
the downwind and
It depends on the landing that you're trying, the landing he's wanting you to, what he's trying to see, what he's trying to evaluate from you.
okay,
If it's a normal landing, no, you're not going to turn right here. You're going to turn down here somewhere.
right.
If it's an engine failure, yeah, you might turn right there.
Yeah, because it's almost impossible to do a 90 then a 90. I mean, it's just a nice bank, at least the way I was doing it.
Oh, you did
Way
it's like a power off 180.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So whether you start your turn here, even in an simulated engine failure, whether you start your turn here, or you start your turn here, or you start your turn here, is going to depend on what? One thing.
It's going to depend on where you reduce your power.
Well, say
Or
you,
where you intersect the glide path, the glide slope for your flyby.
okay, which means what? It's going to depend on one thing. What will that depend on? What will intercepting the glide path at the right distance from the runway depend on?
Where you configure well, I guess it would depend on what altitude you're at and how far you are.
Ultimately, it depends on one thing. Wind.
Oh.
Depends on wind. If there's no wind, maybe I turn here. If it's blowing 30 knots, I'm turning right here.
Well, that's what we were doing all days.
Yeah, so it depends on wind. This is the sight picture thing I was saying. Your sight picture will differ based on wind.
Right.
Okay.
Because of the high wind, we had
Right.
to come in fairly steep.
Right. So if here's my run, so let's just take this straight on. Let's just show the wind component here. Straight in approach. Here's my runway. No wind, power idle, just gliding in.
Yep.
Okay, gliding in at indicating 70. Okay, so let's say this is let's just say that's my path right there. I'm doing 70. 70 indicated airspeed right there. No wind. Engine's off, propeller stopped. Okay, and I'm flying in. All right, let's say that I am from here, I'm 1,000 feet AGL. Power off at best glide, what's the descent rate?
Oh, gosh.
You may not have really paid much attention. It's around,
I read it.
it's around 500 feet per minute, something like that, 500 feet per minute. All right, so if that's the case, if the descent rate's 500 feet per minute, from here, when I chop the power until I hit the ground, how many minutes are going to go by? 2 minutes. So it's going to take me 2 minutes to go from here to here. I'm doing 70. I chop the power at 1,000 feet. 2 minutes later, the wheels hit the ground. No wind. All right. Now the wind is blowing at 70. I chop the power right here. How many minutes later am I going to hit the ground?
2.
Where am I going to hit the ground?
Right below where you.
Right there. That's the effect of wind. Okay? If the wind is blowing at, let's say, 10, well, 2 minutes later I'm going to hit the ground, but I'm going to hit the ground somewhere over here. If the wind's blowing at 30, I'm going to hit the ground somewhere over here. So my descent rate's not changing. I'm still going to be up there for 2 minutes. It's just how far am I going to penetrate? That depends on the wind. My indicated airspeed is never changing. But my penetration is changing. Where I end up landing is changing. So therefore, where I turn depends on the wind. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no right or wrong answer. It is, what am I trying to achieve?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Got time for some more?
What's the best way to practice the controls inside the airplane at home? I know that we were talking about that
Microsoft Flight Simulator. Do you have Flight Simulator?
I have it, but it's just to me it's not really so helpful to me.
Yeah.
I'm not there in person.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you've been doing it, not playing that Flight Simulator,
Mhm.
but
Flying.
more than me.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried doing something at home that helped you?
So I have flown simulators, Microsoft Flight Simulator at home. I've had occasions where I've had that in my house. I don't right now, but I have. And again, it doesn't hurt you, okay? What you don't get is the seat of the pants. You don't feel the bumps. You don't feel the gusts. You don't feel the airplane. But from a sight picture standpoint, this is a double negative. It's not non-beneficial, but it's not extremely helpful until you start moving into instrument training. Unless it's a motion. If it's a motion simulator, well, now it's good. But from the standpoint of I think your question was, how do I recognize, restate your question again.
Well, basically what I was saying, what did you do to get more comfortable being in the
airplane
and then just knowing what to do with all the controls,
Yeah.
Because my problem is whenever I'm in the plane, because I'll be sitting there and my flight instructor will tell me to do something and I'm I kind of forgot. But it's because I need something there for me to study over and keep having my hands on. But I don't want to just wait once a week come into the airplane.
Okay.
I want to be able to do it at home.
So you can do what we call chair flying. He's probably talked to you about chair flying. And that is, once you've done it in the airplane, go home, sit on the couch or whatever, sit in the chair, close your eyes and visualize yourself going through and configuring the airplane properly for whatever it is you're doing. Moving through the controls, feet and hands, moving through the controls, and just visualizing it over and over and over again. That's kind of chair flying. Yeah.
Getting one of those posters.
Yeah, you get a poster to help you to know where everything is located. Yes, absolutely.
Especially when you start getting into using the radios and configuring, because the remotes inside here have the same radios as those, and I mean, I like manuals. I like to learn how to operate all this stuff, and it's hard to do once a week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the way to do it. I mean, but from that standpoint, a simulator wouldn't hurt you, especially if you had a yoke or a stick or something. Even if you had a yoke, it doesn't matter. Yoke or stick, they transfer pretty easily. There's no difference. Yeah, yeah. And get rudder pedals. If you're gonna do that, get rudder pedals. Now you'll have to visually look at the ball a little bit more, which that can be detrimental because now when you get in the airplane, you're gonna want to look at the ball. You don't have to look at a ball. Let me tell you how you know whether you're slipping or skidding. It's really simple. First off, you have to relax your torso when you're sitting in the seat. Let me chair here. When you're sitting in a seat, you're flying the airplane, your torso needs to be straight up and down. When you turn the airplane, when you bank the airplane and turn, your torso needs to be straight up and down. If it's not, you're not coordinated. So if you relax your torso, and let's say we're turning this way, and you feel your body leaning or falling into the turn, you're slipping. If you turn this way and you feel your body moving to the outside of the turn, you're skidding. You don't need the ball. Your body is the ball, right? If you're slipping, the ball falls to the inside of the turn along with your torso. If you're skidding, the ball gets thrown to the outside of the turn just like your torso does. You can feel it in your body. And I recommend that you start trying to feel that like next time you go fly, okay? The only way to do that, though, is don't be tense. A lot of pilots, especially when they're new, they're tense. They're very tense. You can't feel anything when you're tense. You got to relax. You got to relax, okay? Now you'll feel it. Now what do I do with that? All right, well, if I'm falling this way, would I use this leg to pick myself up? No, I'd use this leg to pick myself up. If I'm getting thrown this way, I'm not going to throw myself further. I'm going to use this leg to pick myself up. That's the rudder I use. If I'm falling in, pick yourself up. You're falling out, pick yourself up. That, when you start doing that, and when we talk about the seat of the pants feeling, that is part of the seat of the pants feeling. And the quicker you recognize that and can fly the plane through that feeling, the quicker and faster you do it. That make sense? Yeah. So, flying the flight simulator using visualizing the ball will detract from your ability to feel that sense in the airplane. Because now you're going to get back to the airplane and you're going to have trained yourself to try and look at the ball every time you make a turn rather than feel it. So that's one drawback.
That's a habit I need to break.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to admit that. Especially when it gets bumpy up there, because that ball starts moving all over.
You can't use it for that. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the setup that I have.
All right, what else? Got time for a couple more?
This is, it's not Logitech, is it Logitech?
Logitech is one. Yeah, Logitech. That's what I got at home. I don't have it set up, but I got it at home.
Yeah, just the one with the lights and all stuff.
Is that only on PC? Do you
No,
know?
it works for Xbox.
No, you can also get, I mean, I don't know how much money you want to spend, but you can get, like I have a
It's not
VR
cheap.
headset.
Yeah.
So I have a VR headset, so I can actually look down and move controls and look around while I'm flying and do that kind of stuff. But you get sick. You get motion sickness.
I used to have a VR, but my room is like nowhere big enough to like
Yeah.
actually be able to play, so I just ended up selling it. But
Yeah.
No, it's Turtle Beach, that's the one I've got.
I have
Turtle Beach,
So It
okay.
has the whole throttle quadrant, it's got
Gotcha.
everything.
Yeah.
The VR game?
Hmm?
The like games in VR?
It's Microsoft Flight Simulator. I just have a VR headset that where I'm looking around the cockpit and I can see like the controls and I can see the
I have an
stuff.
eyeball
I can look
tracker,
around.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, mine has little things. mount on the wall, so when I turn my head, it knows, and I can look out the side window, I can look back at the runway, I can look around.
That's the hardest thing with flight simulator, especially if you're doing pattern work,
Yeah,
because
you can only
have
see out there. You got to
yeah, you have
switch
keep
views.
looking like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So those things, like VR, if you got a VR headset, that would help more than just having a static display. But you still don't get the seat of the pants. You know what I mean? You're still not going to get that. Okay. All right. What else? What else? Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and we'll shut it down early here. We're about 10 minutes early. Next week is week 1. It's 2 chapters out of the book. It's chapters 4 and 5 out of the 883-25 Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, PHAC. Read both of those chapters. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, okay? Write down questions as you're reading it. If you need further explanation, write it down. And next week, what I do, as I do in all classes, you give me your questions and I'm gonna write them up here. And I'm gonna make sure that as we go through the 3 hours, your questions get answered. And I pay special attention to it. So as you're reading, if you don't understand it, write it down and bring it next week so I can make sure I answer it for you, okay? See you guys next week.